Hello everyone, welcome to Red's channel. The topic of today's video is the Morini X-Cape 700. I start with the numbers, or rather with one number, the most important one that certifies the appreciation that the twin-cylinder enduro from Trivolzio has received from the Italian public. Since its existence, in fact, the Morini X-Cape has never left the top 10 in registrations, closing 2024 in 9th place with over 2,000 units registered. All this while the arrival of the first and much anticipated model was already in the air. An update that first and foremost addressed what had been highlighted in our comparison as the only weak or improvable point. The engine, which arrived in the form of the new 693cc twin-cylinder, injected a nice dose of liveliness into the Trivolzio Enduro, thanks to the power that now reaches 70 HP, but above all, in my opinion, to the torque that goes from 54 to 68 Newton meter. In short, the heart is completely new, and among other things, it is now also equipped with a slipper clutch, absent on the 650, but Morini seized the opportunity. Also to carefully redesign a line that is appealing. Small tweaks that have effectively rejuvenated the look of the X-Cape, also thanks to new graphics. Some interesting things to note: the windshield, adjustable in height, has a revised and improved adjustment system. The skid plate is less extensive and the silencer has a more elongated shape, and in my opinion, also more elegant. Where Morini hasn't made changes is in the chassis, but then again there was no need, because from that point of view the X-Cape, I must say, has always worked really well. The 17-19 wheel combination is confirmed, as well as the dual choice, because you can have the X-Cape with spoked wheels or alloy wheels, spoked wheels like the one in this test. On the version with spoked wheels, you will find the center stand, much requested by users, and also the dash cam, names that matter for suspension and brakes. The fork is an adjustable Marzocchi with 50mm diameter tubes. On the version with spoked wheels, the monoshock absorber offers remote preload adjustment, not very convenient to be honest, and the Brembo brakes allow you to deactivate the ABS for off-road riding. Seat height is 845, but there is also an optional 820mm seat. And now let's go try it out. Okay, here we are on the X-Cape 700. Let's see what you find when you get on board the new crossover. An aesthetic impact that those who have the 650 will be well accustomed to seeing, because more or less, in terms of what we have in front of us, not much has changed. Let's turn on the dashboard. Here is the first novelty, because the dashboard, although it maintains more or less the same dimensions and the same, let's say, aesthetic settings, is much more defined than the previous one. They have grown in size. We make the dimension of the text, which were indeed a bit small before. The handlebar blocks have remained unchanged. There is the adjustable, and also note the brake lever and pressure, both adjustable. You know, I like it a lot. Everything is controlled from the left block, which can navigate the menu up to the mappings. Choosing with set to change the mapping, you can change the mapping. More than a mapping, it is the riding mode. But it doesn't change anything in terms of engine. Instead, it changes the possibility that in off-road, by holding set for a long time, the ABS is deactivated. Within the settings, you can activate all the various settings, which we are going to see now. It can connect the intercom, connect the navigator, Uncutter, you can change the type of view, and so on. This motorcycle allows for turn-by-turn navigation. So by scanning the QR code and downloading the application available on Apple or on Android, you download the application and then you have navigation. There are no other things to report. Yes, just one. The adjustment of the windshield now happens differently. Small adjustments under the fuel level indicator. This little line has been added to show you which mark indicates full, because before the marks would just turn off, but you didn't understand. Essentially what the reference for full was. More or less, this is everything you can see. It seems to me like a very well done thing, because if we consider that it's a motorcycle that costs 7,500 euros, there are many details. The handle with the Morini inscription, the X-Capsule inscription, the clamp that holds the handlebar. Moreover, an interesting thing is that the handlebar can be adjusted to 3 positions, so at 3 distances, and also rotated. So let's say we have various combinations of lengths of riding positions, which is not bad, because a motorcycle like this caters to users of different heights. Therefore, having all this adaptable ergonomics is not bad at all. I also want to point out another thing. Pay attention to the detail. The cables are encased in a sleeve. In short, it does better than many competitors that are even more renowned than it is. I must say, good attention to detail. But then again, knowing the guys from Morini and Trivulzio, since I live quite close, this thing, you can sense it. A small addition to the off-road mapping, as I mentioned earlier, by holding down the set button for a long time. When you are in the off-road mapping, you access the ABS shutdown menu. You can switch it to off and the ABS is deactivated on both wheels. It's worth noting that when you then turn off the bike and turn it back on or switch to road mapping, the ABS returns. So, for example, if I switch to ride here, as you can see, if the ABS has been activated again, I would say that in short, even in terms of information, there's even the tire pressure. In short, there's really everything we can go.
We're here. The test is coming to an end. Actually, I still have to go back, but I took half a day to come up here and enjoy a bit of the Penise Pass. I'll go in order, as I showed you in the POV. That is, when I get on the saddle to see what you see when you're on it. You find, let's say, the well-known X-Cape. What changes, however, is when you start riding. In any case, the posture has remained unchanged because the ergonomic triangle is exactly the same as that of the 650, but on the 700 it feels a bit more sunken, probably due to the padding, which is a bit more yielding. Even though I spoke with Morini and they told me they will restore it to be the same as the 650, so it should remain a bit more dominant. That said, the optional seat. In my opinion, I would want it. I know there is a rally seat option because they already sold it with the 650. But I understand that they will probably also work on a seat a little higher because, in my opinion, given the imposing nature of the bike, given the presence of the bike on the ground, even someone a bit taller than me, maybe reaching up to 1.80 meters, on this bike they could fit well and a raised seat would be very convenient for them. The angle of the leg is quite closed, but not excessively so, at least for someone of my height, which is tall, 1.71. However, on the other hand, as you can see, both feet touch the ground well, also because Morini has done a good job. The seat has remained unchanged, but they have also streamlined the area here, where we could call it. The number plate holder, which has become a little more streamlined compared to before. Things that haven't changed and that I might have liked to change a bit are the foot pegs, or let's say the foot peg holder in general, which actually widens a bit suddenly, going towards the passenger foot peg, which means that if I drive with off-road boots and I'm in the action of braking or shifting, no problem. When I go on the tips, this part tends to spread my foot a bit. Here maybe I would have made or tried to narrow it a bit, but I realized that the space is what it is. Another new feature introduced on the Escape 700. While I'm at it, the heat shields that were optional on the 650 are now standard here. And then the luggage rack, which has been moved 5 centimeters back to gain space for the passenger to sit more comfortably. In short, these are all refinements, but this shows that Morini pays attention to what the customers say. And, well, in the end, listen to the comments that come a bit from us who are testing it, but also from you who have bought it and use it every day. I move on to the engine, which, in my opinion, obviously is given special attention in this test because, as I also said at the beginning of the video, in short, it was perhaps the slightly weaker part of the X-Cape 650. Here, the engine has now obviously injected quite a bit of liveliness into the bike. I must say, moreover, first of all, it's an engine that seems more refined to me. The bike vibrates less and thus the overall comfort benefits, meaning it still vibrates a little but less than before and in a much less annoying way. Especially when the engine revs up, there are far fewer vibrations reaching the foot pegs than before, as if the correct displacement for this engine, therefore the internal balance of this engine, since everything else has essentially remained unchanged, was the 693 displacement, which, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm not wrong, was achieved by lengthening the stroke and not by increasing the bore, and hence the torque figure, which has become more interesting compared to before. And that's what interests me the most, rather than 70 horsepower. Indeed, there's more push, maybe. At the lower end, it's still a bit soft. But when you reach 4,500 to 4,700, in short, the engine feels like it has a lot more body compared to before. It also becomes lively. The throttle remains cable operated. I must say it's a good throttle. Cable operated, there's no on-off. I can't say there's an on-off. Of course, when you get used to using the latest generation ride-by-wire systems, when you start again from zero, it's a bit rougher.
But I repeat, it's not a matter of on-off. Also because the balance between engine braking and pickup is really well designed. So the engine is, in my opinion, the ace up the sleeve of the X-Cape now that, let's say for those using the 2024 model, selling very well even in the 650 configuration. Now there's an extra boost to convince those looking for a bike like this. I also asked directly to the owner, Alberto Moni, if there have been changes in terms of suspension settings, especially practically nothing has changed compared to the 6.5, rightly so in my opinion, because the 6.5 already worked well in terms of cycling, and we had said it could handle even more power. It handles it without any problems. The braking system is very good, with a nice bite, a good pressure point, the right power. The rear seems well calibrated to me. The only thing is when you brake a bit aggressively, so let's say you have those 5 minutes on the road and you really want to pick up the pace, the fork is a little quick both in compression and rebound. However, I remember the fork is adjustable and I would want a little more control, both in compression and rebound. The shock absorber follows, and let's say that at this point, this speed in leaning, sometimes it tends to unload the rear a bit, which tends to activate the ABS slightly. The shock absorber, on the other hand, in my opinion, is good, with some sharp hits, but nothing significant. It is really well calibrated, well set. There's also the knob on the version with the spoked wheels to adjust the preload, not super convenient because it's down here. However, I must say that in the end, it added that extra touch that doesn't hurt, because when one uses the motorcycle with a passenger and the bags, they put on the top case. In short, giving 4 turns of the spring takes really just a second. The aerodynamic protection is also good. I must say, with my height, I always kept the windshield in the low position. When I raise it, perhaps a slight turbulence reaches my helmet, but keeping it low, since the protection is good, even the legs are well protected, the air tends to pass a bit from underneath. In fact, this morning when it was cool, I felt a chill under my thighs, not on my knees. However, nothing really significant, the protection is good, and you can travel for a long time. I point out this little curve here on the windshield that distorts a bit. So if you keep the windshield high and you're a bit underneath, when you start driving through the curves, this little piece is a bit bothersome. The view, however, for the rest, in my opinion, the strength of the motorcycle is precisely that it has improved. Especially the delivery, the quality of the delivery, and also the refinement of the engine in how it expresses its power. And this makes the motorcycle totally more comfortable, even for traveling many kilometers. The motorcycle, which I remind you, is completely analog because it absolutely does not have traction control. The only electronic feature, of course, is the ABS, because it is mandatory by law, and as I told you, it can also be disabled. Then, regarding the engine, I say yes, well, it's true, maybe it doesn't yet have the low-end punch of some competitors. However, it has very nice mid-range power. And above all, in my opinion, it is geared correctly. Moni did well not to shorten the gears to give it more punch than ever. Maybe you don't need it, because then when you go traveling, you're with the engine, revving too high at 130 kilometers per hour, 6,000 RPM, we still have a good margin. So, let's say it has made a significant step forward. The X-Cape in terms of finishes, as we already mentioned, was a bike to consider, because Morini is really attentive to details. And as I showed you before, in short, the cables are well placed, all. The parts with the escape labels. In short, there is really an attention to detail that for a vehicle costing 37 to 500 euros is not so common. Choose the spoked wheels or alloy. Well, I've already mentioned this, like in the video of the 6050. If you do a lot of road, only road, giving up a bit of weight on the unsprung masses can only be an advantage, so you also save some money. I add that in the 7,500 euros, the stand is also included as standard. The central stand on this bike is not present at the moment, but it will be available. Also the central stand, which many of you have requested, so here it is standard. In the alloy version, however, you have to take it as an optional, but going back to the choice between spoked and alloy, it's obvious that the spoked wheel gives a look with the knobby tire, gives a slightly more off-road feel, but if you really don't intend to, go off-road, and this bike, all things considered, handles off-road decently. Well, because Morini has always been very attentive to this aspect. Even the alloy wheel works perfectly fine. You give up a bit of weight, you get a little more liveliness from the engine, a bit more speed in execution, and you also save some money. So that's everything I noted down here about the Escape 700. If you have any specific requests, I'm waiting for you in the comments below. If you have something to say or comment about the bike, I'm always here waiting for you. you know that we always respond to everyone, but it's a good project. And I must say that it has satisfied me.